Hello and welcome to another podcast, The Father and Joe. And Father, I want to continue off of really the last two podcasts we did. With last podcast discussing Jesus' commandment of love each other as how I have loved you. And the podcast before that being about purgatory. So where I'm going to go here is essentially asking about how is Jesus going to judge us, because we go through life wanting to be able to become holy and saintly, as we've discussed previously in this series, and we had discussed the virtues about these are the important attributes you need to focus on in life, and the thing is the more you're better at them now, you actually have a better mortal life, and it'll help you in the next level as well. So, again, if you haven't listened to the Virtue series, they're probably worth your time. Where I wanted to go here was actually talking about the judgment, because Jesus talks at length about how to love everyone as yourself, and how hard it can be to not love someone we perceive as an enemy, whether it be close or far away, to be able to just put something in our mind to justify having a negative outlook upon them, whatever that may be, thinking that they're evil, so therefore if they're evil, we should stand up against them, even if that's not based upon truth. It's based upon something we may have heard or something that may have been written out there without ever actually doing the due diligence to find out. It makes me think of, as we were talking in the prior episode, about how Jesus didn't lose his temper. Well, Jesus starts his ministry. He's essentially out in the desert by himself because he wants to be by himself. And then the devil just starts instantly teleporting him all over the place, out of the desert. He was happy. He was where he wanted to be. He wanted to be by himself, and now he instantly teleports him to the top of the temple to outlook everywhere. Now he's in the middle of a city, goes from pretty much the exact opposite you can go to in terms of quiet, serene environment to loud, bustling area and buildings and no more nature. You got all this city built up, which inherently is going to change the landscape around you. But he doesn't get upset. He just he stays calm, as you said. He doesn't lose his cool. So I wanted to start with that as the starting point. I know that there's a lot going on with that initial question, but just to see where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. The my first thought is to nuance what you said just slightly. I know it wasn't really the point of what you were presenting, but when Jesus goes out to the desert, he actually is going out to the devil's sanctuary in order to take him on and to fight him in one-on-one combat. So Jesus goes out to the devil fasting and praying, and he knows that the wilderness, rather, the desert, is the place where the devil lives. And so Jesus comes out of hiding. He was in hiding for 30 years. He's baptized by John in the Jordan, and then he goes out after Satan and basically says, "I'm coming for you. I'm taking this human race back from you. I'm taking paradise back from you, and you're going down." And then the devil comes after him, waiting for him to be as weak as possible, fasting for 40 days, and then begins to tempt him in all of these different ways. You mentioned one of those temptations, placing him in the middle of the city to disturb his peace as much as possible, to tempt him with ruling over this world, to tempt him by telling him to cast himself down from the temple and protect himself or call on the angels. And anyway, all of that drama ensues. But Jesus really goes after Satan. So we do not have the strength of Jesus, and we are called to receive his strength and to receive his help and to try and grow in virtue to overcome vice. And ultimately our virtue finds its fulfillment in love. And you gave us in our last podcast that beautiful verse from John's Gospel: love one another as I love you. That's the fullness, the fulfillment of virtue is the pinnacle of love. And that needs all of the other supporting elements in terms of prudence and justice and fortitude and temperance to support it. But you were making a point also about the way that we make judgments and that we justify ourselves, that we justify our hatred and dislike, that we justify our rage, our negative emotions, our selfishness, our self-centeredness, the way that we judge others, that they somehow deserve it, as if we know what's in their hearts, and that we could make that judgment about their sinfulness or their worthiness or anything like that. And we just don't have access to any of that information. We're not in a position to judge the hearts of others. We don't know how much freedom somebody has. We can't even say that someone has sinned. We can say that someone has done an evil thing. Certainly, someone who kills someone else has done an evil thing. We don't even know that they have sinned, however, in the event that they went into a rage, that they lost control, that they didn't have the freedom even to stop. That's an extreme example, but we can think of other evil things, even like drug use or drug addiction. And maybe someone had some freedom before taking the first hit, although even in that circumstance, how many people are really suffering so much or are really caught up in the haze of peer pressure or just being at the party and going along with people. Anyway, so we don't know what's going on in the hearts of people. That's the point. God knows. God is the only one who knows what's going on in their hearts. And so we're not in a position to make claims on their salvation, to say that somebody's going to hell or not, because we just don't know what kind of freedom they have, what kind of knowledge they have. We don't know how responsible they are for the evil things they're doing. And so we can't justify hating them or getting revenge on them or behaving in evil ways toward them, fighting evil with evil. Jesus tells us to fight evil with good. And so we want to pray for everyone and fulfill the command of Jesus to love everyone as he loves us, as he has loved us. And that's really a great challenge. Did I cover everything? I feel like I missed something that you said, Joe.
Well, one of the things I want to know about, so yes, discussing the part about how we're judging each other, but as he discussed, was Jesus puts down, love each other as I have loved you, or as I do love you, which it was quite a revelation when you said that can be either way, either past tense or present tense. But ultimately, one day we're told that Jesus is going to judge us. And, we just discussed in the last podcast that you're not going to get 100% on this test. So how does that really work? Again, not trying to strive to figure out what's the minimum that I need to do to just get a passing grade, to get a diploma and keep it moving. But really, what is it that Jesus is looking for? Because he has taught us so much in so many different ways that we don't have the power of divinity behind us to try to hit everything, or maybe even just a certain sector of what he's taught us is going to be virtually impossible. So that's where I wanted to emphasize the question, to know kind of how is it going to be judged so we can better focus ourselves moving forward through this life.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, sorry for missing that point there. It's a little bit mysterious because we do hear things like in Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, and it's the picture of the last judgment. We recognize it as that, and he does that based entirely on corporal works of mercy. I was hungry and you gave me food, thirsty and you gave me drink, naked and you clothed me, stranger and you visited me, sick and you visited me, and so. Uh, Stranger and you welcomed me, in prison and you visited me. So he does that. He claims, the judgment is entirely based on those corporal works of mercy. At the same time, another one of the stories, the parables that he tells are those who keep their lamps burning. And what is the lamp? What is the oil? But those faithful virgins who keep their lamps burning. In another story, it's about investing our talents. Those who invested much, who risked much in using what God had given them, make a great return, and then he rewards them for that. Another one is about faithfulness and service, that when he comes in out of the fields, the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Well, that's actually the talents. So anyway, a number of different stories of judgment, but ultimately we are judged on love, and love is the one thing that lasts. And the church has done a great work for us in theology and in trying to describe, create some. So the church has done a great work for us in developing a theology, categorize some sin, and then trying to answer some of those questions. And the church talks about things in terms of mortal sins and venial sins and unintentional venial sins and imperfections and things like that. But the church has basically summarized that when you commit a mortal sin, which requires it to be a really bad thing, and then also that you have full knowledge of what you're doing and you have a full freedom of will to intend that action, that when you do that, you really destroy love in your heart. And in that way, you cut yourself off from God. Basically, to use that image we had from the last podcast, where Jesus says, "Love one another as I love you," and his love is flowing in our hearts, and his love animates us and makes us more like him. When we commit a mortal sin, we're basically cutting ourselves off from his love. And where there is no connection with his love, then there also can be no salvation until we restore that connection through an perfect act of contrition, and then ordinarily also sacramental confession. So that's the kind of system of the church's theology and moral theology that tries to bring together a number of those different points from the scriptures in terms of judgment, that we're judged, condemned based on mortal sin, but to look at it from a positive approach of the growth in virtue and the reward for virtuous deeds is also, I think, helpful. St. Peter said, "Love covers a multitude of sins," and so wherever we are on the spectrum of having committed some venial sins, maybe having committed some mortal sins, we want to grow in love. And if we're in mortal sin, if we're really doing things that are destroying other people, I mean, I'm doing this podcast right now from communist China. You can look up on the internet the atrocities of the Maoist regime and the murder of 90 million people in the 30-some years of from 1949 to probably 1947 to 1976, about 30 years, Mao reigned over the destruction of 90 million people. So we talk about the 12 million who were killed in concentration camps by the Nazis. Almost sounds like a drop in the bucket compared to 90 million people. So when someone is that deeply immersed in that much evil, again, as I said earlier, we don't know his heart, and we can't make the judgment. The judgment is reserved for God. But there's a lot of conversion that's necessary there before love really takes root in a heart that has become so blackened with so much evil. But to bring it back to the rest of us who are probably living at least moderately good lives, expanding the love that we're doing, growing in love, has a way of washing away sin and expanding our virtue and making more room for God, that we can be more filled with Him. One of the images used by the saints to describe heaven is that in heaven we are filled, but a thimble can be filled and an ocean can be filled. And what do you want to be in heaven? Do you want to be a thimble or be an ocean? No one will be dissatisfied, and there will be no comparisons and no envy in heaven. But may we strive to be an ocean, that we can be an ocean of grace, an ocean of love, to continue expanding as we move toward heaven. So I've sort of walked around your question a bit about the last judgment. I guess the simple answer is we'll be judged based on mortal sin. But to take a positive approach of striving for the greatest growth in virtue, that we can really have our hearts expanded in love, that we can be filled in heaven like an ocean, would be sort of my encouragement.
Sure. And for most of us, that will require some sort of positive change, because no one's living, most of us are not living perfect lives now. Obviously, or at least not obviously, hopefully, there's at least some crop of saints living in this generation now with us here on this current planet. Don't want to take anything for granted, so obviously they're going down the path. But for the majority of us, there's going to need to be some form of change. And it's actually ironic. I was reading a study earlier this week from a neuroscientist, and in our brains, a chemical is released whenever we're confronted with having to do change about ourselves. It's the same type of chemical release in the brain that's the ancient flight or flight mechanism, as if we were going to be attacked by an animal that could eat us. So that's how our body, mentally, chemically speaking, rejects change. Now, obviously, the church has been in business for a long time to do conversions, which is another fancy word for change of our bodies and minds to become closer to God. So we have this built-in biology to kind of go away from changing, regardless of where we're at now. We can be in the worst spot or the best spot. Just the way our brains are, don't change. That's how we are. And we've discussed a couple times in the past about how going down the way of the church is sometimes contrary to biology. We spoke about that, talking about how some of the religious saints created their orders. It's not natural to go towards someone with leprosy to be with them. It's not naturally to go where you are going to be socially humiliated and go with them. But we do it. So I wanted to get a chance to acknowledge, all right, this is where we're at, chemically speaking. How do we go about this to change for the better, and how do we make that easier for each of us moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's not hard to. It's not easy to grow, to change, to convert. It's not easy to face our own failures and our limitations. It's not easy to recognize that our lives are not perfect. We like to delude ourselves into thinking this is I'm doing an amazing job. But a few quiet moments usually reveals pretty quickly the reality of our shortcomings and the things that we've done. So, and it's interesting that there is that resistance to change that's built in us, and it shows us something about how important stability is, and that's a divine quality. Stability is a great quality, but it's only a great quality if you've already come to perfection. That's why it's a divine quality, is because God is perfect, and so it's good for Him not to change, because any change would make Him worse. If you're perfect and you change, you get worse. So, but for us, we're never there yet. We're never fully converted until we are in heaven, until we are one with Him and also share in His perfection. So, but the stability is important, and so our bodies resist, our minds resist some change. I think just knowing that is helpful, that when I try to set out changing habits or changing my attitude or really looking at my life and being honest and being open to conversion, that I'm going to get some internal resistance, that it's going to be hard, that it's not going to be easy, and that it's going to be a little painful. And I think just knowing that helps, so that when it is painful, we don't go, oh, maybe there's something wrong here. Maybe I need to stop this change. No, it's going to be a little painful. And that's not something to be afraid of. We can accept that. But it's not going to kill us. And we can push through and try to change our attitude. And that happens one step at a time. One of the benefits of there's a sort of repetitive quality to our lives. You know this in a particular way in marriage. You probably have had the same fight with Teresa about 50 times, and you're going to have it again. So that's good news, because that means that you can do it differently the next time. The bad thing is that when we do it the same way every time, if she yells at you for the 50th time because you didn't take the garbage out or something, well, try to work on that. That's a good indication that it's time to be more proactive about that, not wait to get yelled at. And we have this quality in our lives. Our lives are repetitive to a large degree, and so that's why also staying the same is helpful for us, because the same skill we needed to handle a problem yesterday is the skill we'll need today and tomorrow to handle the same problem. But the same mistake we made yesterday with something could become the same mistake we make today and tomorrow, unless we make a decision, press into it, persevere, and one step at a time. Maybe we do it a little bit better today and we still messed up 3 different ways. Well, can we do it 2 ways better tomorrow, and then we only mess up 2 ways? Can we make incremental progress? And it's a good way to approach life, is keep pushing on that incremental progress. And faster than we would have guessed, we find ourselves having made a lot of good changes and having come a long way. Because incremental progress actually releases another chemical in the brain, oxytocin, that stimulates a euphoria that feels really good. Feels really good to do something right, to make a little progress. And that motivates us to do more right, to make a little more progress. And steady, little by little, we find ourselves in a much better place.
Certainly, an example that some of us may have lived through is how much you don't want to go through those first couple of days of working out, but then you wake up a couple of weeks later and you just want to do it. That's exactly how that works. So, Father, I definitely thank you for your teachings here today, and thank you for being with us all the way from China. And we'll be with everyone here again next week. Thank you, everyone out there, for helping us grow incrementally, because we have definitely grown more and more with each month in and each month out. And we only have done that by you guys telling other people and continuing to listen in yourselves. So we thank all of you for that, and we will be with you again here next week.